Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. The coronavirus has infected over 26 million people, claiming more than 861,000 lives across the globe. The United States is the worst hit country, followed by Brazil and India. India's caseload has exceeded 3.8 million after it registered nearly 84,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 10 people have lost their lives to the virus overnight, taking the toll to 6,328 with over 297,000 cases. Beijing says Washington's measures to restrict its diplomats in the US are unjustified. China's embassy in the US said the move contradicts Washington's self-proclaimed values of openness and freedom. Earlier, Washington instructed Beijing's envoys to seek State Department's approval to visit US universities or hold cultural events. The International Criminal Court says the US sanctions on its prosecutors are an attack on justice and the rule of law. In a statement, the Hague-based tribunal said the unprecedented measures constitute serious attacks against the court. Earlier, Washington blacklisted ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda as she launched a probe into possible US war crimes in Afghanistan. In the Mexican city of Cuernavaca, 8 people have been killed after gunmen stormed a funeral service and opened fire. Officials say 14 others were wounded in the gunfire. The police say they are on the hunt for the gunmen. News coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The new coronavirus has infected over 26 million people, claiming more than 861,000 lives across the globe. The United States is the worst hit country, followed by Brazil and India. India's caseload has exceeded 3.8 million after it registered nearly 84,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. Details in this report.
The new coronavirus continues to devastate Americas and India, while the governments there refuse to reimpose stricter lockdowns. In India, over 1,000 people lost their lives in the last 24 hours, increasing the tally to over 67,000. After abandoning the WHO's vaccine drive, the US has now refused to pay its pending dues of over $62 million to the World Health Body. Brazil has reportedly nearly 1,200 deaths overnight, taking the count to nearly 124,000. While the government touts a decline in cases, medics say Brazilian figures have been doctored to open up the ailing economy.
Brazil has reached a tragic number of 120,000 COVID-19 deaths and almost 4 million cases. Considering that the underreporting of cases is 3 to 5 times the number of official cases. Last week, for the first time, the average number of deaths was less than 1,000 per day, a statistic that was celebrated by some political figures whose strategy is to promote increasing flexibility in economic and social fields.
In Europe, Italy says the first shots of AstraZeneca's potential COVID-19 vaccine could be in the market by the end of this year. Meanwhile, Britain has decided to put another $666 million into the trial of rapid COVID-19 population testing for the disease. Greece has recorded its first coronavirus case in the migrant camp of Moria, which has now been placed under 2-week quarantine. The European Center for Disease Prevention and Control says the second wave of the disease has brought the bloc back to square one.
You may remember that at one point we have been already below 15. So there is an increase, and this increase we have been seeing now for more than 5 weeks. It has been a slower increase as we had in March. However, we are almost back to the numbers that we have seen in March.
Mainland China has reported 11 imported cases overnight as it continues to maintain a zero domestic spread. South Korea has recorded 195 infections in the last 24 hours.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 10 people have lost their lives to the coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 6,328. The ministry said 424 more tested positive for the disease overnight. It said the number of active cases in the country is at 8,761. The ministry said at 95% rate, nearly 282,000 patients out of some 297,000 have recovered. Sindh remains the most affected province with nearly 130,000 infections, while Punjab has reported close to 97,000 cases so far. Moving on, Beijing says Washington's measures to restrict its diplomats in the US are unjustified. Earlier, Washington instructed Beijing's envoys to seek State Department's approval to visit US universities or to hold cultural events. China's embassy in the US said the move contradicts Washington's self-proclaimed values of openness and freedom. The statement read, China has always supported and facilitated foreign diplomats, including those from the US. It urged Washington to correct its mistake and revoke its decision. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington was merely reciprocating Beijing's restrictions on American diplomats in China. The State Department said it will take action to properly identify all Chinese embassy and consular social media accounts. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court says the U.S. sanctions on its prosecutors are an attack on justice and the rule of law. This comes after Washington blacklists ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda as she launched a probe into possible war crimes in Afghanistan. In a statement, the Hague-based court said the unprecedented measures constitute serious attacks against the court. The ICC said it continues to stand firmly by its personnel and its mission of fighting impunity for the world's most serious crimes. Earlier, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused the court of illegitimate attempts to subject Americans to its jurisdiction. Washington has remained critical of the court since its foundation and is one of a dozen states who do not recognize it. Now, Qatar says it supports a two-state solution with East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state to end the conflict with Israel. This comes after Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani met with the US President's senior advisor Jared Kushner in Doha. Al Thani said Qatar remains committed to the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. He said the initiative binds Israel to completely withdraw from the Palestine's territory it captured in the 1967 Middle East War. The two sides reviewed the strategic relations between Doha and Washington. Earlier, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman also stressed resuming Palestine-Israel talks in a meeting with Kushner. Now, Turkey says its maritime agreements with Libya in Ankara's red line in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, Vice President Fuat Oktay said no one can question the deal, especially France. The deal signed last November lays out maritime boundaries between the two countries to establish an exclusive economic zone. On Ankara's seismic survey, Oktay emphasized Turkey is carrying out work only on its continental shelf. He said Greece cannot question Turkey on Meis Island or Castillo Rizzo. Regarding the U.S. decision to lift an embargo on Cyprus, Oktay said it poisons the regional peace and stability. He said some members of the U.S. Congress are pursuing efforts to damage Washington's ties with Ankara. Moving on now to the Mexican city of Cuernavaca, where 8 people have been killed after gunmen stormed a funeral service and opened fire. Officials say 14 others were wounded in the gunfire. The police say they are on the hunt for the gunmen and have not made any arrests so far. They say ballistics from heavy caliber weapons used in the incident suggest they could be related to other serious crimes. Mexico has been marred by gang violence for many years, with successive governments failing to tackle the problem. Now moving on to Belarusian, President Alexander Lukashenko has welcomed it will be a bloodbath if the opposition comes to power in the country. Speaking in the town of Baranoviki, Lukashenko refused to back down despite Western powers threatening sanctions. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington and EU are reviewing sanctions on anyone involved in human rights abuses in Belarus. Rallies against Lukashenko have persisted for weeks since he claimed victory in the presidential election. The Belarusian leader said he worked hard for the country and wants to protect it from breaking into pieces.
I know if opposition comes to power, they will cut everything to pieces, begin to kill people and their children. This is what worries me, not the power. As some people in Russia say that Lukashenko is holding on to that power. I don't want my country to be cut to pieces, which I've built from the ruins of the empire, and I don't want the honest, decent people who worked on it to be killed.
Now in Bulgaria's capital, Sofia, thousands of protesters have clashed with the police in front of the parliament, calling for resignation of Prime Minister Boyko Borisov. Demonstrators are opposing proposed constitutional reforms, calling them a trick of the government to stay in power. Protesters threw petrol bombs and firecrackers at police, who retaliated with water cannons and arrested 60 people. Borisov says he is answering protesters' demands for a restart of the political system by launching a very contentious revision of the constitution. Meanwhile, President Rumen Radev has called for the resignation of Borisov's government and has appealed to deputies to dismiss plans for a new constitution. Now, Pakistan has strongly condemned the republication of blasphemous caricatures by French magazine Charlie Hebdo. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the act has hurt the sentiments of Muslims across the world. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said there has been an increase in Islamophobia, racism and xenophobia across the world. Qureshi said Pakistan has convened its concerns to the French government through their ambassador in Islamabad. Qureshi said Pakistan believes in freedom of expression, but he said civil liberties do not mean giving out a license to hurt the sentiments of others. He hoped the world will take immediate steps to prevent such acts. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan has ordered the release of female prisoners on line with a top court's verdict issued in April. In a tweet, Khan wrote he has issued the directives after a meeting with the Minister for Human Rights and the Attorney General of Pakistan. The Prime Minister also sought a report on foreign women prisoners and ones on death row for humanitarian considerations. Human Rights Minister Shireen Mazari said the decision is a great move forward for a humanitarian approach to prisoners. She added the Prime Minister has also asked the ministry to provide him with a complete timeline on prisoner reform implementation. Almost the entire world has seen a drop in air pollution levels amid COVID-19 pandemic. Factories closure and a halt in transportation to contain the spread of the virus have led to a massive reduction in carbon emissions. The government of Pakistan is taking steps to sustain these positive impacts of the COVID-19 lockdowns. More in this report by our correspondent, Manahil Ahmed.
The implementation of the coronavirus lockdown has brought the world economy to a virtual halt and increased mental health issues. But during these mass quarantine times, some of the world's most polluted cities saw clear blue skies after years. Pakistan is looking to sustain that environmental recovery. Advisor to Prime Minister on climate change Malik Amin Aslam says the lockdown proved if you give nature a chance, it can rebalance.
40% of the air is coming from the transport sector. So that's where the opportunity is. I think that's where the opportunity is, that it is still at a reversible stage. So we can still mend our ways, clean our transports. That's why the EV and the fuel switch is important, because it targets transport, making transport clean. So if that happens, I think we have in the long term also a good opportunity.
Climate Change Minister Zartaj Gul said the government is promoting environment-friendly activities to mitigate the impacts of climate change.
We are working on this 3 plan. One is to promote the bicycle lanes in every city of the Pakistan. Second is to deal with the waste management in Pakistan through scientific ways. And the third is to go for the urban plantation through 10 billion tree tsunami in Pakistan.
The 5-month lockdown in Pakistan shows a drastic drop in pollution levels in many cities across the country. The COVID-19 restrictions show that a slight change in lifestyle can help us secure a better environment-friendly future for the coming generations. Reporting for Indus News, Manahil Ahmed, Islamabad.
Now, the Twitter account of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's personal website has been hacked. Twitter said it was aware of the activity and has taken steps to secure the account. The account, having over 2.5 million followers, is the official Twitter handle for Modi's personal website and his mobile application. Modi's personal Twitter account, which was unaffected by this incident, has over 61 million followers. The tweets, which have since been taken down, ask the followers to donate to the PM's National Relief Fund through cryptocurrency. Hackers had in July accessed Twitter's internal systems to hijack some of the platform's top voices and use them to solicit digital currency. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Back now, moving on with the news stories. At least one person has died and thousands have been left without power as Typhoon Maisak smashed into the Korean peninsula. South Korea's disaster countermeasure authority said over 2,000 people have been evacuated from the affected areas. The 9th typhoon of the season and the 4th to hit the peninsula this year have destroyed more than 800 facilities, vehicles and property. Meanwhile, Japan's Coast Guard has rescued one person from a cargo ship that went missing with 43 crew and 6,000 cattle on board. Korea's Met Administration said a second storm, Typhoon Haishen, is right at the Maisak's tail and is likely to make landfall next week. The coronavirus medical waste has been polluting Indonesian waters, which presents a looming health risk as it can trigger the COVID-19 outbreak again. More in this report.
Medical waste from across Indonesia has been polluting the water bodies in the country. According to the Health Ministry data, 1,500 tons of COVID-19 medical waste was produced in the country each day from March to June. Recently, a waste landfill site collapsed in Tangerang City, sending hundreds of tons of medical leftovers in the Cisadane River. Residents living downstream have reported a constant stream of medical waste washing up on the banks, leading to potential uncontrolled spread of the coronavirus.
This river is a water source for the whole Tangerang area, and we are concerned about the sustainability of this river. We don't want it polluted with any waste, including industrial waste, which is dangerous, especially during this pandemic. If we find medical waste that is used to treat COVID-19 patients, it's even more dangerous.
As Indonesia struggled to contain the spread of the coronavirus, its health ministry has acknowledged that pandemic caused an increase in medical waste.
A new regulation has just passed that consists of guidelines for medical waste treatment in every health facility. We have been pushing for this regulation with help from the Environment Ministry because of this issue. So our concept is that medical waste treatment must be handled on a regional basis.
The ministry also admitted the country lacks treatment facilities, but said it is working to find a solution.
Now, an adventurer in Arizona floats 25,000 feet in the air, hanging with a cluster of giant-sized balloons. David Blaines, 47, kept dropping some weight on the ground during his flight to speed his ascent. After reaching a little higher than the height of Mount Everest, David strapped on an oxygen mask to assist breathing. The adventure lasted for half an hour as David released himself from the balloons and free fell for 30 seconds before opening his parachute. Blaines has a history of performing high-profile and high-risk stunts, such as locking himself in a fishbowl, trapping himself in ice blocks for 2 days, and standing on tall, thin tower. His latest feat also went without any glitches, and he reached back to Earth safe and sound. stocks in Asia are trading mixed as investors react to regional economic data releases. Australia's trade data for July showed exports declining 4% month on month. Mainland Chinese stocks shed earlier week's gains, with trade lower, with Shanghai Composite trading about 0.25% lower. The Shenzhen component has also dipped 0.25%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index trades 0.5% lower. Japan's Nikkei 225 is trading up almost 1%, while Topix Index has also gained 0.5%. South Korea's Kospi is trading over 1%. Australia's ASX 200 is also trading around 1% higher. Oil prices are also higher, with international benchmark Brent crude futures above the flat line at over $44 a barrel. The EU's chief negotiator says the UK will have to move if it wants a post-Brexit trade deal by the end of this year. Speaking in Dublin, Michel Barnier said he is disappointed by insufficient overall progress. He said they did not see any change in the position of the UK. Barnier said the end of October is a strict deadline to finalise an agreement for next year. Meanwhile, British Premier spokesman says David Frost and Barnier had a useful review of the agenda for next week. He said Brussels' insistence on state aid and fisheries is an obstacle to making progress overall. And that is the end of the bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.